Review, Harvard Business School Club of Singapore mentorship program. So there are a few of us who are mentors here, and I'm very grateful for OE and Alea to join as guests on this. What I would like to do is really have a section which sort of runs like this. We'll do a short introduction for each of us, the mentors, and then we would go into probably a few sort of base questions. One, what does FinTech that mean for you? And can you describe that, or how the industry is to somebody that is coming in from the outside, like our students? So how would you describe that industry? Second, how would you enter into that industry? So your own personal story of how you made the entrance or transitioned into FinTech. I think that would be very interesting for our students. And then the third thing is, where do you see this going? And what advice do you have for our students as they transition from school into careers? So what advice do you have for them? How can they prepare for interviews and things like that? So that's sort of the general frame. To all our mentees, thank you for coming in on an evening slot. Very grateful that you can make time for it. As you have questions, just type them in so that we can have them answered as and when, or the guest mentors or the mentors can pick it up as they are relating their own experiences. If you can switch on your cameras, that would be awesome, because we would really like to see you. If you can't, that's fine too. But if you could, that would be awesome. So I'll probably start with OE. Maybe you could start first, followed by Alea, then Trina, Victor, and then Adeline and me. So we just do a 2-minute introduction of ourselves and how we ended up here. So it sort of gives our mentees a flavor of who we are and what our experiences are. So OE, over to you.
Great. Thanks, Ravi. My quick introduction. My name is Oi. I'm Chief Commercial Officer at a startup called iStocks. iStocks is a private securities exchange. We can go into a lot deeper about that, but it will take me more than 2 minutes. Just to talk a bit about FinTech, I've spent the last 20 years of my life, pretty much most of 20 years of my life in capital markets. I ran investment banking for UBS. For the last 6-7 years. Been with a couple of other investment banks before that. And what FinTech really meant to me was the curiosity around, what does technology do to my business, and how does technology disrupt my business? So, what do all these new technologies like blockchain, which is also called distributed ledger, capital markets, private to public, what do they all mean? And they kind of all converge into this company that I decided to join called iStocks. So I joined them actually in January this year. So I've been there for a year now. I'm happy to talk about the change or the leap from traditional big banks into a startup with a very, very new approach. It's been a massive learning exercise for me. Where do I see this going? I think the financial services are all focused on what new technologies help them do, whether it's cost or market or revenue share. And I think with Singapore's support, MAS support, I can only see FinTech growing massively as a space. So I think my 2 minutes are up, and I'll hand it back to you, Ravi.
Oh, that was really sharp. Well done, Oi. The 2-minute counter was awesome. So, Alea, could you take yourself off? Oh, yeah, there you go.
That's the first thing you always do on Zoom, isn't it? Hi, my name is Alea Fairchild. I'm based in Brussels, Belgium, which is a bit of it's midday here, so I haven't had my dinner yet. I have been a market analyst for a lot of my career. I started from the tech side of FinTech. So I started working in IT infrastructure. And as I started working for companies like Dun & Bradstreet and G, et cetera, I got a lot of insights into how people manage processes and put processes together. And as I was doing a lot of consulting work, I was working with a lot of the banks. And I ended up doing my PhD in banking and technology, actually for the Belgian Banking Federation. I was actually trying to prove that banks do different things with technology. And they said initially, no, you'll never find that one out. And it turns out I did, actually. It got published in the Banking Review, and then I've been doing a lot of banking and financial service and insurance consulting ever since. I met Ravi via Ecosystem, which is a company we both have relationships with. who does market analysis and advisory. And I also teach technology marketing to students here in Brussels in the graduate program at KU Leuven. So I came in from the other side of FinTech in the tech area. What you're seeing though right now is a big shift, and COVID was part of it, but not a big part of it, a shift to a better customer experience. The customer knows they deserve better services. So the whole thing about customer experience, design experience, making the process streamlined and frictionless and contactless is where the banks are going right now. And the insurance companies as well, really making it very easy for you to do business with them. So the design and the branding of banks and insurance companies is a lot of what I'm working with at this moment. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Leah. Trina?
Hi everyone, my name is Trina. I have a background very similar to Oyi's actually. So I come from a traditional banking background. So a range of investment banking, asset management, private equity, and so on. And having spent almost 20 years in that space, finally decided one day that actually maybe fintech was the way to go. And I had been watching that space for a very long time, and probably financial services was one of the very last sectors that got touched by technology, in my opinion. And even today, sitting in a fintech, I do see progress in the sector, but not in the speed of velocity or in the same way that I've seen some of the other consumer related and so on other sectors. So I work for a company called Atomi. We actually have quite a few businesses. Originally started in credit scoring and KYC for other banks and e-commerce and other businesses, and eventually branched out into lending of various sorts in itself. So my perspective is very much on the ability of using non-traditional data sources and superior forms of data aggregation and technology to really rapidly better assess credit risk, and then also use technology to really deploy capital to borrowers who might not traditionally have had access to capital, whether it's because it's a remote part of Indonesia or because the size and amount that they were looking to borrow was too small. So really serving the unbanked. Where I see the industry going, I mean, I think technology has really changed the face of the world, and I don't think that we're going back anytime soon. All the conversations that we have with our banking partners are all about how much we can help them improve their solutions and capabilities. So I think there's only one direction. However, I do think that there is growing convergence between financial services and fintech, and then the line for sure is starting to blur.
It's fantastic. Thank you, Trina. That was a great introduction. So, Victor.
Hi. Can you
Yeah,
hear
we
me,
can
right?
hear you.
Okay,
Yes.
great.
Yes.
Okay, I'm a bit different from the most of the gentlemen and ladies here. I'm not the investment banker side. I'm a civil engineer from NUS when I graduate 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago. Then I moved on to the Ministry of Defense, and I came out doing information technologies under the Capital Land as well as Ascendus. And way then 20 years ago when I came out, we have the first real estate investment trust, and I went through that phase of understanding how they raise funds, and I move on to advise the company chairman as well as CEO on how to raise the value of land using information technologies. So I was focusing on data centers, and then after that, when I found that Ascendus has hard time doing this data center real estate investment trust, I came out myself, and I started my own private equity funds focusing on data centers, but it's real estate centric. So long story short, now I'm actually sort of like advising my clients, management consultants to my clients on raising funds for real estates using blockchain. So we are talking about cryptocurrencies, but it is more like security tokens. My clients also venture into things like decentralized finance. So they also set up decentralized exchange, and the common names in decentralized finance is Uniswap and Compound. So they actually set up all those things. Uh, what I'm doing here is actually helping my clients to do those things, but to me, what is more dear is my private equity focusing on real estates, and I can securitize it using security tokens and all those things. I'm a bit more technical in technology, but I'm also real estate centric in finance, real estate finance. So I think it's a bit of confusion on my side whether I'm in the finance side or real estate side, but I'm still know where I am, the niche where real estate finance coupled with blockchain, and then the actual real estate deployments. So thank you.
Thank you, Victor. I think this is very interesting. And going back to the comment that Trina made earlier, which is about convergence,
Yeah.
and also about how Alea spoke about before, with how things are sort of coming together, and there is no industry that doesn't have tech anymore.
Yep.
So I think it's really about trying to see what are the use cases and how do we really can use different capabilities. So Adeline, maybe just a quick introduction from you, and then I'll probably kick off the session.
Sure. And I'll leave it to I'll give more airtime to the experts in FinTech, because it's very rare that we have so many experts in the room. It's really interesting, I think, to hear all the different perspectives, and every area of finance is being touched by tech, right? So we have people in the room, Oi, who represents capital markets being disrupted, Trina representing credit risk being disrupted, Victor, blockchain, so currency, and then I know on the call we also have Mihak and Shabnam, who are in private banking and in asset management, and they're also seeing FinTech touch their areas of finance. So for our mentees who are listening on this call, I think regardless of whether you take FinTech as your first step after school or whether you go into more traditional finance roles, I think FinTech will very much be in the future of your finance career. And so Ravi, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you so much, Adeline. I think that's a great summary of how we want to set up the session. So maybe I would start. The first question is really about when you are looking at the roles that might be entry-level roles in any of these FinTech establishments, what could be the potential areas that companies might be looking at to get students in? So what can students expect when they are out there applying for roles? Oi, maybe you or...
Yeah, I'm happy to start first. I would say, interestingly, if I look at our company, I think about half our headcount are actually the engineering team and the product team. And so I don't know how many of you are actually in finance or in engineering, but that is actually where the bulk of the headcount needs are. And actually, more interestingly, from a blockchain perspective, from what I understand, the younger you are, the better you are, because that technology is changing so quickly, and you have to learn all sorts of new things that we tend to actually look for either fresh graduates or students who have graduated just a few years. Just on the finance side, the original thinking was when I started hiring more experienced financial professionals, because we have to, you need come understanding a lot of lingo, a lot of structures, what's the difference between a fund and a, what's the difference between an open-ended fund and a closed-ended fund, right? What's the difference between that and equity? You kind of need to understand that at some heart of it. I started changing my mind a little bit over the last year or so, because I think kids today are actually so well read. There's so many resources that they pick up very, very quickly. I took on an intern who actually hadn't been to university, and he became one of the most valuable members of the team. He unfortunately had to go to university. But I also started to see, we took in graduates or just 2 or 3 years out of school. And I feel the energy and they're able to sort of take much a fresher perspective to what is very traditional, very stodgy ways of thinking of marketing and all that. So we are starting to also look at the business side, and I also wouldn't write that off as an entry-level position as well.
That's
I think,
fantastic. Go
yeah.
ahead,
So I
Trina.
was going to say, I echo a lot of what you were saying from our perspective. A lot of the recruiting that we do at graduate level and on campus are actually more towards the technology and engineering aspect of our business. We find those students particularly relevant in terms of the skill set, but also kind of blank sheet of paper, so to speak, so that very eager to be trained up and so on. So we really like hiring fresh grads for those roles. However, on the finance side, I do feel that if you have a finance background, there's a certain kind of curve where if you've done a few years, 2 or 3 years in a banking type environment, that's really great, because then you have some core skill sets that then becomes adaptable and applicable, and that you can then build on in the fintech space. However, I do also find that for some people who have worked in financial services traditionally for a very long period of time, working in a fintech type environment is very, very different. I was fortunate enough to have, taken a bit of a short stint in a family office. So I had some sort of a SME type exposure and disorganized inverted commas exposure, whereas working in a fintech is very fast paced and very, very different to working in a financial institution. So if I look back at my career, I would say that actually it probably makes a bit of sense to spend a little bit of time in some of these institutions, because the traditional banking setup gives you this foundation, an understanding of the ecosystem, the different products that are available, and how all the pieces fit together, which actually really helps a lot when you're in the fintech environment.
Thank you, Trina. I think I like the way that you sort of described the core being also important in not just having an understanding of tech alone. Alea, I see that you want to come in on a comment. Go ahead.
There's another angle for this. If you believe, I'm going to use the term fintrepreneur, if you really are on the fintech side of tech, that you want to create these contactless, frictionless activities that you're seeing a lot of right now, that get up and go of wanting to be in essence an entrepreneur within a business, or an intrapreneur, is also a really interesting area right now. I would agree with Trina's comment about having a couple of years in the business just to get the seasoning, to know the terminology. But if you're very bent on creating the next best integrated thing, there's a lot of folks who want that. It's fast moving, but they like that enthusiasm. So maybe you don't know a lot necessarily, but if it's cutting edge, everyone's bleeding, so to speak. So you really need to go out there and give a shot at the ones that are creating those new interfaces that will become the next Apple Pay and Google Pay, that are going to integrate in with consumer products. So there's a number of different angles you can take in entering the market.
That's a very fair point. It's back to what you were saying before, that she started by looking at people from a certain sort of background, and then she quickly realized that the energy and the agility had far more value, and that sort of built her, sort of shaped her belief around who should be the best person to hire. Victor, you might have a different perspective coming in from an entrepreneur point of view. What would you look at when you would hire fresh grads?
Actually, because actually fintechs, there's three different parts. One is the institutional, I mean the banks are doing that. The other one is entrepreneurs. The last one is really people who does fintech or blockchains to specifically meet certain business requirement and gaps. So the one I'm doing is actually more for entrepreneurs, because when I meet my clients, people who are my friends, they just want to start a fintech business, and then they move towards either something that is centric towards the exchange. When they do decentralized finance and decentralized exchange, they start to look at things that is a bit different. So the type of people that we need for fresh graduates are the creative guys, but they don't really have the foundation, so they can really learn a lot in the how we manage the exchange. But the technical sides, usually I think some of our mentors actually mentioned that we really get the young guys, but actually what you need is some programming experience. I dealt a lot on Ethereum's infrastructure, which is ERC20 protocol. All you need is to understand the protocol, and you are IT centric. You can actually deploy that very easily. The only key to the whole business is making sure you make money. I mean, in the end of days, why should we sell out a company that don't make money? And then that is the key. And most of the time, we need to raise funds and drive the business. So fundraising is institutional based. So no matter what we want to say, we still need to go back to some VC or private equities to raise funds. So I think the key is number one, technical. Number two, understand the financial side to raise money. Number three, very important, is the business. If you don't grasp the business, you're not going to do anything creative to make money. And all you do is, you know, bootstrap and then burn your cash. That's all. Yeah.
Makes sense. Maybe I switch gears a little bit and ask a question related to how the students can position themselves when they go for interviews or when they apply. What is it that they can highlight that can make their resume stand out as opposed to many others who are also making that application? So maybe Trina, maybe you start and then we go to OE and then Alea. What advice do you have for the students to help them stand out?
I think for me, the most important thing is the enthusiasm. So the willingness to try something different, to embrace something that is unstructured, and to really be highly dedicated to your job. Because I think that in a startup or kind of VC type setup, everybody is trying to build the business, right? So there is no set, 9 to 5 setup. So you could be asked to do something at any particular point in time, whether it's a weekday, weekend, or evening, or whatever it is. But to have that dedication or hunger to want to learn or to contribute to the team, I think that's super important. So for me, the single most important thing is being able to embrace really that culture that is fundamentally different to working in a traditional environment.
Makes sense. Oyi, how would you? What else would you recommend?
I so echo Trina, because I kind of been taking these interns, and I will have to say to all of you out there who's thinking about a fintech job, especially a startup, it's insane, right? Because things change so much in a matter of months, and you're just like I had a guy who was working from doing profiles of the funds to the Salesforce implementation to coordinating sort of investor onboarding, and it's sort of on a daily basis he was just doing sort of 10 different things, right? And he reveled in it. I had another intern who basically rocked up 2 weeks later and said, "Oh, I can't work on the weekends." We were like, "Oh, okay." So first of all, the attitude and and actually, I think a lot of our students today, and please prove me wrong, are so structured in the way that they've been educated. They actually can't take the speed and the variability in a startup job. So I warn everyone, it's not for everyone. And you do have to think quite hard. But if you take the attitude that you're going to do it, and you take whatever sort of comes along, you'll be very successful. The second thing I would add is some level of passion in finance, right? Would help tremendously. And it doesn't, it depends on what kind of part of finance. Finance is so varied, right? I mean, from Trina's business to Victor's business, to make, maybe what Alea is doing and to I am doing are completely different. So there are going to be different fintechs with different types of subsets of finance, and to have that basic level understanding, you can come in and talk about, for example, credit risk to Trina or real estate to Victor is going to be super helpful, because then we know that we can just take you and train you and, off you go.
That's
If
a
I,
really good one. Go ahead.
hey Ravi, if I can jump in with a question.
Yeah, go
So
ahead.
both Trina and Oi work in startup environments in fintech. What about in a fintech within an established organization, like an iBank?
Yeah, it's a great question.
That's an interesting one. From what I can observe from the banks that I used to be in and across the platform, the innovation teams actually at the core of it are more technology focused and slightly less finance focused. So the frontline bankers actually don't really appreciate that yet. So I don't have a ready answer for that. I don't know if anybody else does. Because I certainly, if
Go ahead,
that
Andy.
route would be an engineering and a tech route, not a finance route.
I think the two things I was thinking about, first one echoes what the two ladies were saying about tenacity, but tenacity and actually also talking about tech. The nice thing about tech IT integration with business is that the tech person has to understand what the business person is telling them. So the tenacity to ask questions. My first week in the software company, my boss came and gave me a gigantic thick book. I was talking to a lot of clients. He says, whenever they give you an abbreviation, just write it down and look it up later. So a lot of it was self-taught. How do I, as you're going through, what am I picking up? How can I put things together? But the one thing, if you want to sell yourself, is to give them example of a problem-solving skills you have, because everyone wants someone who can help them find solutions, not just pick apart problems, but actually try to come to a conclusion somewhere. So if you want to give examples of how you've done problem solving within your interview, that's usually a really good way to show people that you could actually get results.
I think that's a great one, because I think there's a lot of us who probably would love, back to what Victor was saying around creativity. And the creativity is within the context of problem solving or within the context of the business, not just creativity for the sake of creativity. So Victor.
Yes. um, because I'm an IT guy, so to me technical is not a big issues. But the fintech, especially in Singapore, right? Is really you guys are really in the right place. Okay, if you are the students in Singapore and you are intending to go fintech, the legal side with the Payment Service Act, everything has been set up, ready to roll and go in Singapore for fintech, especially banking, digital banking. People like Ants Finance under the Alibaba Group, people like Singtel, Grab, they are very huge digital banks. And of course, the smaller guys who take up licensings from the small, those main payment institution and money changing, this is really new territories to the fintech world. Then you can actually start a new business addressing to changing of cryptocurrencies to fiat, where fiat means US dollar, crypto means bitcoins. So all these become legitimate and go very fast. So I think if you are a young man and you want to be an entrepreneur, Singapore is where you are going to be, and you can look at all, not just the technical side, the legal side, but also the opportunity that is in Singapore. Okay, there's a lot of things that you can do. Just what you can do with your limited experience and resources, you can couple with people who have the experience and the connections with the institution. So you can do a lot of things. It's always up to you to come up with a business model that fill the gaps. So in the past, you have a lot of centralized exchange. Now you have decentralized exchange. It's really different things, and Ethereum is going to be different because they have Ethereum's 2.0, and things are like these are actually quite substantial. So I'm just focusing on one aspect, one vertical of fintech. If you want to go to business gaps, then there will be even more.
Fantastic. So I know that OE is short on time, so I do want to pose a quick question to her and probably see if. So in terms of recruitment, I know that we've talked about what qualities are people looking for in the fintech sector. What's the best way to approach a company to find a role in fintech? What would be your advice? What's the best way to land a role, even if it's an internship or a startup role? What's the best way to do that?
I think first of all is identify, which fintech you're keen on. A lot of, I don't know about anybody else, but we have taken some approach in terms of the grants and the stuff that the government is supporting, and we're always looking for interns or what we call the longer term interns, right? The 6-month ones, et cetera, right? So there is, I think, a bigger demand for internships. And I think there's a willingness for fintech to explore that, right? Just for a variety of reasons. I would say that, and I've seen CVs that have come in, and for example, I had a kid who wanted to come and do UI UX. And so I said, oh, why don't you interview this guy? And my HR said, we talked to this guy. He had no experience. He didn't know really what it took. And, he just has a computer science degree, right? That's about it. So I think what every startup wants to do is make sure you hit the ground running, right? We don't have if you want to be trained and you want to go Hong Kong for training for 3 months and all that, go to a big bank. There's no such, so you need to sort of display that you already have some base level knowledge and the willingness to sort of learn, and you've done a portfolio that is relevant, whether it's in the tech side or in the finance side. I think those would be the key things that would get you into a second round interview for sure.
Fantastic. That's a great insight, because a lot of us struggle with being able to cut through the first round. And I think that first round is so critical. So Trina, what advice would you give on being able to cut through to the second round? What can they showcase?
Yeah, I think so. First of all, at least for our company, we are perpetually hiring. I think there's a huge shortage of people, especially where the business is growing, right? So I think that's the first point. So there is always a space for good people that want to join the company. I think being able to exemplify your contribution and value add to the business is probably is quite important. So again, to Oyu's point, we do not have, unfortunately, the time to really train the people up, which is why, at the beginning I had actually said maybe the best thing to do is really go to some of these larger organizations and do a couple of years of kind of part of their graduate training program and so on, to really understand not just business, but also just structure and how you organize yourself as an employee, right? So what is a protocol when simple things like holding meetings or taking minutes and managing people above you or your peers. So just simple things like that. I find that if you're fresh out of uni, you might not have had any of that type of experience, which is actually quite potentially valuable. But kind of getting beyond, the CV stage, I think, again, showing that energy level, showing that you're adaptable and that you're very committed, is pretty important. Last week we did turn down someone who asked, what are the working hours like? Because, it's very hard for us to say, it's going to be 9 to 5, I would be lying. And it's very clear that, you're only, if you're asking that kind of question without kind of putting it in context, it's very easy to say, oh, that's going to be a tough grind for the interviewee, because, we also don't want to match or take on someone that, has different expectations, right? It's just going to be a bad experience for both people. So we do want to find the right people that are interested. And then recently, we had, I had someone leave because they were a couple of years out of Accenture, and I thought that he was an excellent employee, very, very dedicated and committed to working long hours. But, at the end of the day, he said that, it wasn't for him because he really preferred the structured environment and the very large organization set up. So you have to really think for yourself also if that's the type of organization that you want to be in. So don't just think, oh, FinTech sounds really great and you want to be a part of it.
I think I like that. I like the two parts of it. I think there is a perpetual demand for great talent, but there's also a very, very high possibility that you would probably not find the right fit. So I think it's really up to both the students who are coming into you, to the organizations, as well as the organization, to be very clear around these expectations so that there is no mismatch. And I think the more the students are clear about what their drivers are, what kind of work do they like, what kind of environment do they prefer, whether it's structured or unstructured, how much stress are they ready to take, what kind of working hours do they prefer. I think these are, how much learning would they have to do. I think these are going to be quite important in making that choice. Alea, just keen on your perspectives on how you see this play out in Europe and other parts of the world.
I want to make 2 points. Kind of what Trina was saying from a slightly different angle. You are in a fantastic position here in the school you're in to network. Talk to people who already gotten jobs in this area. Take them for a coffee or a tea, sit down, find out how different their life is now, and what's expected of you before you even put your CV in. Second point I want to make is a really interesting one. Again, I'm based in Brussels, but also I know from working on the FinTech Festival, there's a lot of regulatory policy issues going on right now in FinTech. And I always tell students, at least on my side, if you want to know a company, go into procurement. If you want to know a bank, go into regulatory policy, because you're exposed to a heck of a lot of stuff that is cross-product, gives you a lot of good exposure, but as a policy assistant, you're doing a lot of the legwork initially, but in doing that legwork, you're actually educating yourself. So if I would go in for an interview myself, I would figure out what pain points the bank is experiencing or the FinTech is experiencing, and show them how I can help them. Instead of sell myself in terms of the property, I would sell my skills to the problems they're facing. By changing that parameter, you make yourself more valuable.
Fantastic. I agree with
Awesome.
that. Thank you.
Great
perspective. Go ahead, Edlin.
And actually, Alea, to follow up on that, and Trina, you might want to jump in as well on this. So given that the Singapore government is investing a lot in FinTech, right? And there are a lot of regulatory bodies in Singapore, not just MAS, but many others, who are also involved in setting policies that affect FinTech. Would you suggest to some of our mentees that they would explore a career on the regulatory side?
I would say yes, initially, because it gives you a lot of exposure. And it is more of a structured job because you're working for a structured institution. That's just my opinion. I don't know, Trina, how you feel about that as well?
Yeah, it could be possible. I think it could make you quite employable afterwards, possibly. But, you know, I don't know to what extent that then requires, I don't know, a legal background. I'm not sure. That's not really my area of expertise, but yeah, potentially.
I've seen a lot of political science majors, business majors, even communications majors go into policy decisions.
One thing though, you know, one thing that I was thinking about, you know, in this FinTech space, because I was thinking, you know, if I'm a graduate coming out of university, where should I really be applying, right? If I'm interested in FinTech, you know, I think there are pockets. So aside from, you know, being in the FinTech arm, division of a large banking institution, I think those roles are actually quite far and few between, and usually they like to hire people that have FinTech experience, or, you know, they're quite particular about the type of people they hire. I was thinking actually, you know, maybe looking at the larger, more established, you know, tech players. So like the likes of Ant Financial, Shopee is moving very heavily into FinTech, Grab Financial, obviously. So these larger established players, they're also heavily, aggressively hiring, but that gives you that kind of balance between some structure and very large team that you can learn from, but then also still that FinTech type exposure.
Fantastic. That's great. I just, being conscious of time, I want to just check in with the students or even our guest mentors Guys, do you have any questions that you would like to put to our mentors here? It's a great opportunity to pick their brains. Anyone? Just come off mute or type, whatever works best for you.
Ravi, while they are,
Yeah, go ahead.
just add certain points, because everybody aptitude is different. So if you are very technical guys, go heavy on the technical. There are lots of things you can do technically. Obviously, technical doesn't mean that you have to design the blockchain of the bank, but you can really go very technical, because all the source codes for blockchains are open source, so you can literally copy and paste and understanding it. The other part is, beside technical, you like people, then I suggest you start, because people centric is what really blockchain is all about, because people, you have to really connect to the people, raise money and talk about your company. That will helps, not just in communications, marketings. There's a lot of things you can do. The most important part about fintech is actually entrepreneurships. And because you may not, you have heard so much about startups. I think you should, just take a look at all the different startups and ask yourself what they are doing. And as you know, you go through this, you have some ideas, some creative ideas. But in the process, when you go to your interview, you can impress the people interviewing you on the amount of knowledge you have on the current fintechs, be it startups or the established institution like the banks or the end finance, as well as the Grab. I see some questions coming up. Let's
I think the question is, how do you switch from a very traditional setup, like a traditional bank or investment bank, into a fintech organization? So I know that Trina, you briefly touched on it, and so did Alea. So maybe you guys could start with the comments, and then we go to Victor. What advice would you give in terms of transition? How can you make that transition?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It's also something that we watch very closely for. So whenever we hire people from the banking environment, the top thing for me is that adaptability to work and interest and hunger to work in an smaller or unstructured environment. That's actually my absolute must question when I'm interviewing. So understanding their mindset and their reason for moving, and looking through their CV to see indications that they have either other interests, whether it's different courses that they have done, or other extracurricular hobbies. All of these things kind of help indicate whether they have a propensity or interest to kind of do something that is outside a traditional banking environment. And then yeah, I think that's probably the first thing. And then as Victor also pointed out, looking through or having some knowledge of what's been happening in the sector also really shows that you have that kind of inclination to really move, right?
Makes sense. Alea?
I'm going to add also to show that you have connections outside of your current employer, that you're actually networked in the environment, that you have been belonging to groups outside of work, that you are aware of how the market itself, how the dynamic has moved. Because I know a lot of folks who've been, let's say, 5-7 years in a bank, and they've moved in different positions in the same bank, but they're very entrenched in the corporate culture of that bank, and they're not aware of what's going on in the rest of the industry. So showing the industry knowledge, reflecting, again, as Trina was saying, you have the credentials, you've done some lifelong learning, but you also belong to groups and other activities outside of the workplace.
Fantastic. Victor, anything to add on?
Yeah, because actually this fintech thingy remind me of year 2000, when the dot-coms was a rave, and people are just creating IT platforms. They call it .com instead of calling it apps, right? Now we all call it apps. So I encourage young men like you to really put some effort in the entrepreneur side, because that will push you to go into areas where you can specialize on, but it's also your character. But don't miss it, because it's not going to be very like extended kind of phase. So you see some extraordinary growth in the last 2 years. Doesn't mean it will last forever. Just do whatever you want within these 2 years.
Fantastic. Thank you. I think that's a great point. I do want to pick up two questions, one from Lulu and one from Guan Min. They sort of come together. One is around, is there a place in FinTech as an ecosystem for people who may not be great at tech and may not be great at finance, but they are good, but they are not absolutely brilliant on both sides or either side? That's one question. And the other question, which Guan Min is asking, which is a sort of a subset of that, is what is more valuable for a FinTech? People who have very deep knowledge in a sector, which is what you call a typical specialist, or do you have somebody who's has more breadth and can understand and do a lot more activity? So maybe I start with Alea, then go to Trina.
I had to think there for a second. From what I've seen, it depends on what level you're hiring into. If you're coming in as a fresh graduate, they're going to expect you to be a generalist. You may have specialist interests, and that's going to actually propel you a little further because you're showing interests in a particular segment, but they're looking for someone that they can help grow into the space. So at this point in time, unless you have additional skills outside of school, but you've been working for a while, that you can show specialist knowledge, you'll be brought in probably as a generalist. To make progress in your career, you will want to specialize ultimately, but not so fine that you can't move. Yeah. That you're the left-handed purple people eater. There's no way that you could actually change from that sort of thing. The nice thing about, I have to admit, I'm a generalist who can talk tech to non-tech people. That's my skill set. And because of that, I've been able to be more agile in my career movement, and I've made some nice lateral moves in and out of organizations as I've seen fit. It all depends on the career path you're looking for. Please remember, at this time of your life, you're going to have at least 6 different careers in your lifetime, including wife and mother, husband and father. And this is just the first layer of skills you're going to build. And this is a skills evolution. So if you want to go specialize, I would recommend it. But generalists still actually get good jobs.
It's true. And I think based on what Trina said earlier, and I let her make the comment again, but I think they're looking for people who can do more. But go ahead, Trina, what's your advice?
Yeah, I was going to kind of sit on the fence when it comes to answering these questions, because, I don't think there is a clear answer whether a specialist or a generalist is better. You will be put into, or you will find a role for yourself, in a whole organization. You kind of need both, really. And, as I was thinking about Lulu's question above, about, if you kind of have a knowledge of both tech and finance, but not very strong at both. So, we hire project managers, for example, right, that actually require the amalgamation of both, but, ensure that the execution of a particular project is successful. So that requires discussions with both, technical engineers, but also finance people. So there's a space for people in I think, in whatever your skills or background is, but it's very important that you can articulate what you think your value add is to the startup or the FinTech or even in general, whatever role you're looking for. In very early on in my career, I didn't get to really tailor my CV until later on. I realized that actually you don't have to send the same CV to 10 different employers, right? You can actually understand what it is that you're attracted to about a particular employer, and you can accentuate and pull out certain parts of your experience, and you can do that as you become much more experienced and you've got much more track record to choose from. But being able to really focus your CV on particular areas that you think make you employable to that particular role is actually a bit of an art or a trick that you can use to make yourself more attractive.
I think that is a good point. Even in the early part of my career, we would focus on the projects that we did that were more relevant to the employer rather than the experience. I mean, we had no experience at that time when we were just starting out, but we had done some projects or internships, and we would highlight that and to say that this is what might be of interest to you, or even during the interview, just bring that up. Victor, you've seen both sides of the fence. What's your advice?
I think generally is basically I was 10 years in SAF, so we always say that the people who are lazy but smart are the leaders. I'm not saying that you don't have to be very hardworking. You don't understand what is ERC20. When people throw you jargons, you can't understand anything. But if you are smart, very clear in your mind what you want to do, I would encourage you to look at the entrepreneur side, because you don't have to be the entrepreneur, but it is a great help to the leader of that company to have someone that think in a business, because there are not many guys who think clearly what is the business all about, and they really need a lot of creative juice. And guys like me, 50 years old, I'm a bit old, but when I don't have that clarity, I would not want to do things and burn money. So I want to have clarity. I like guys with clarities.
Good point. I do want to highlight what Janice was saying on the chat here, that one of the ways to showcase your talent is to be able to go on to, say, events like hackathons and be part of events or be part of webinars and ask questions. The other way is also to showcase your talent in writing posts on social media or writing about your project or things like that. That might help you give more visibility to the employers. I think this is also one of the things that we have to get smarter at, is to be able to showcase the work that we do. Alea, go ahead.
I have to tell you a quick funny story. One of my students, the best job he got in banking is he knew Fortran. And Fortran is a mainframe language, and a lot of the folks who know Fortran are retiring. The fact that he actually knew this, was able to manage these folks, got him a very quick into the job because he knew what they were talking about. And there are not a lot of people in their 20s who know Fortran. So,
or know how to work on an AS400. Or they might not even know what an AS400 is. But I think this is, again, back to the same issue around how can you highlight what you know or what sets you apart from the rest of the talent. One question which is out there that I think it's a very interesting one is from Lee around what challenges do we guys foresee as FinTech matures? And I think this is also back to the comment that Victor was making earlier. This is a finite sort of growth path. So what happens as we get to that end of growth path? Or what risks or foreseeable risks do you see? So maybe, Alea, I could ask you to weigh in first and then follow through with Trina.
I'm going to at least follow through what Victor was talking about in terms of blockchain. Blockchain is being used in a lot of different industries, not just financial services. It's being used in education, it's being used in healthcare, it's being used in real estate. If you understand a good tech sector like blockchain, you can migrate that career to another industry. Just a thought.
That's transferable skill right there.
Yeah, exactly.
I agree. Trina?
I actually don't see FinTech in the mature phase. As a matter of fact, I would probably say that FinTech is probably in its infancy. When I look at the huge potential that it has, I feel like we've only just scratched the surface when it comes to the way that technology can really transform the sector. So I see huge opportunities in almost every direction that I look, and especially so in Asia, where we've been slower than Europe, for example, in terms of opening up and being much more open and creative about the types of businesses that are being built. So when I then look at the challenges, For me, the biggest challenge facing fintech is actually on the regulatory side. So, if at the moment in Singapore, the MAS have been, fairly cooperative and positive in terms of supporting fintech, but at the same time, I think they will not hesitate to really clamp down if they feel that anyone is really abusing the system or it's not conducive to the broader economic kind of direction that they want to take. So for me, and that applies, across the board in any country, being able to protect the governments, being able to protect their own economy against financial shocks and risk is the single biggest factor. So for me, that regulation risk is always there, and that's where that creativity really comes in. So being able to find smart minds that can help problem solve and say, okay, this opportunity has been shut down because of regulation. What else do we think the industry needs and we can solve with technology? So I think there are definitely ample amounts of opportunities in fintech in my mind.
Fair. Victor?
Yeah, it's it's really open, like Dr. Elena was saying. Is it Dr. Elena? Yeah, she was saying that you know blockchain, and blockchain is just the same as database. It's just a distributed database, and you can use it anywhere. I'm actually applying it to my real estates, and I'm talking to real estate associations of Singapore to apply blockchain onto the finance sides of it, maybe to raise funds using blockchain, because in the real estates world, there is a gap when you try to raise anything between 1 million to 10 million. It's very, very tough. So this is one way to fill up the gap. Of course, there's a lot of regulatory requirements and things like that. That's why we are being useful. Just be creative. There are a lot of problems to solve in the world. There are ways that you can help the world, and just go for it, man.
Thank you. Yeah, I would probably echo the comments that all my fellow mentors have made. I do want to bring in a perspective from the Singapore FinTech Festival, where I was facilitating a panel on the future of work. And I think there, if one of the things that came out very strongly is the constant change that is going to continue, and the need to upskill and reskill all the time. So one thing which that all of us need to probably take, let's say, be okay with, is the fact that we are all learning at the same time. And as much as in some of these new emerging tech areas or emerging fields, we are probably almost at the same level where you guys are. And in some cases, the students who are coming out now are brighter, faster, more creative than we were or we ever will be. So there's a lot that we can learn by working together. And I think that's what companies would value, is you bring your point of view, your creativity, and your learning agility to contribute. I think that was one key learning from the panel that I facilitated. I think the second one that came out was also the fact that what we consider as very emerging tech today will become quite mainstream in another 18 to 24 months. So in that sense, you have almost the same sort of shot at it that any of us have it. And so I think you have to take that opportunity. You have to be able to go out there and capitalize on it. The networks are quite crucial, so please build the right networks, associate, go talk, discuss with people. All of us are open to doing that. So it would be awesome if you need more help or you need any kind of support, please reach out to us on LinkedIn or through emails if you have them. We would be happy to continue to help and support you. I know we are almost out of time. So I'm very grateful to all my fellow mentors who've taken the time today. Special thanks to our guest mentor, Alea Fairchild, dialing in from Brussels. Thank you very much for doing that. And thank you guys. Have a great evening and a great day, Alea.
Thank you so much, Ravi, for facilitating today's discussion. And you can reach out to your mentors if you'd like to get in touch with any of the panelists on today's call, and we can share with you their LinkedIn, or you can just look them up on LinkedIn as well and ask to connect. And we have recorded this session and we'll make it available to everyone so you can rewatch it, and you can also share it with your friends who are interested in FinTech. So as you know, this is a incredibly interesting and fast-moving field. Staying up to speed, keeping your network fresh, super critical if this is a field that you're looking to enter. And a lot of people can give you different perspectives on the opportunities. There are tons of opportunities. We've only started to scratch the surface in our 1-hour call today. So a lot there. I think where you are, it's really blue ocean in front of you, right? So it's about crafting the role, finding the right role for you. And don't worry whether you're a generalist and a specialist and all these questions. I think, you'll find that all these opportunities are out there. It may not be your immediate opportunity right after you graduate, but you can work your way towards that. Wherever you land, you will learn something. So just keep that in mind. Okay, great. Thank you again, everyone, so much for your time today. Thank you to our panelists, and thank you so much to Ravi. And we'll see you in the next session on Sunday. Okay, bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.